Good afternoon. My name is Enders Wimbush. I'm the Senior Vice President of Hudson Institute. With me today is Senior Fellow Chris Sands, a specialist of security, of economics and trade, with a particular emphasis on North America and especially on Canada. Chris, I want to inquire about a number of issues that are coming up for Canada in the next few months. First, on April 21st and 22nd, President Bush, President Calderon of Mexico, and Prime Minister Harper of Canada are meeting in New Orleans to do something. What are they going to do, and what's the significance of this meeting?
Well, this is the fourth meeting of the Security and Prosperity Partnership summits that were set up by President Bush, one of the big initiatives of his second term, designed to take a look at not only trade issues and non-tariff barriers, but also at security cooperation and homeland security and in anti-terrorism. We've seen a lot of talks, 4 summits so far, including one in Montebello last August, previous summit in Cancun in 2006, and the original summit, which was in Crawford, Texas in 2005. What we haven't seen are a lot of results. And so what we're looking for in New Orleans is have we accomplished enough to really say that this is a success, and should we continue it after President Bush leaves office?
Is there going to be any particular issue on which the 3 presidents or the 2 presidents and the Prime Minister are going to come into conflict, or are their views going to converge?
Well, one area where they all agree is NAFTA and the importance of talking about NAFTA as a positive for all 3 countries. So much of our trade depends on that agreement. There'll also be a discussion of energy, other areas of cooperation, a discussion on carbon capture and a common strategy for the region. All of these things will be on the agenda. I think they'll largely be in agreement, but where they disagree are with many people in all 3 countries who are doubtful as to whether North America is part of a secret plot to create a North American Union, or there might be some other ulterior motive behind these talks. They're going to try to reassure people, no, this really is baby steps, but we're making progress.
Let me ask you a little bit about the American election and Canada's recent intrusion, if I can say, into it. Canada, as we all know, is the United States' largest supplier of energy: oil, gas, electricity, and uranium. In March, Canadian diplomats got caught in a firestorm of criticism by being caught in the middle of the Clinton and Obama campaigns, where candidate Obama was talking about his commitment to NAFTA publicly on one hand, and making, at least as the reports went, somewhat disparaging comments about what he really intended to do on the other. First, how do the Canadians see this, and what are the stakes for Canada in 2008 and 2009, especially with respect to NAFTA?
Well, the stakes couldn't be greater for Canada. Canada sends more than 80% of its exports to the United States and imports almost 80% of its imports from the United States. So its trading relationship with the U.S. is the key to whether it is or is not in recession in the near term. It's a significant thing. In trade, for Canada, it's 40% of their GDP, so it's not minor. So when you hear major political candidates, serious ones, out there saying that we might renegotiate NAFTA or we might throw the agreement away, they're obviously concerned. Also, there are now some billions of dollars of investments in new energy capacity. The oil sands in Alberta to hydroelectric dam projects in Quebec and Ontario, all designed not just for Canadian needs, but to export to us. So the big question for them is, what really is the strategy of the United States? Are we going to continue to have this friendly relationship or not? When you hear from Democratic presidential candidates, what you often hear is we want to renegotiate NAFTA for higher environmental standards or better labor standards. Very few people focus on Canada, and many Canadians feel they're getting a bad rap, that their economy is at stake because of problems with Mexico. So they're looking for clarification, and unfortunately they got caught in a denial round where the candidates were offering different points of view publicly and privately. What's interesting about that is, in some ways, it's similar to our debates about Iraq, where the last people that we ever talk about are, what the Iraqis themselves might think on the ground. We only talk about our own policies, what it is we would like to see happen. For the Canadians, they have one great difference from the Iraqis. They can talk back, and they do talk back in our media, and they pay a lot of attention to what we have to say. So I think they were right in seeking this clarification. They're very concerned about what the U.S. trade policy is going to be like and what U.S. security policy is going to be like after the 2008 elections, dust is settled.
Let me ask you about another place where the Canadians are talking back, and talking back rather forcefully. Canada is pressing other NATO members to put more troops into Afghanistan, to measure up to the commitment that Canada has made, which is, I might say, something which has warmed the hearts of most of the people south of the Canadian border. Let me ask, is it possible, one, that the Canadians are going to have an effect? Are they going to be able to push the Europeans particularly into greater commitment in Afghanistan? But beyond that, is this activity, is this commitment on Canada's part sustainable for Canada itself in the short and longer term?
Well, first of all, the Canadians have, as you say, made a tremendous contribution. Initially, they made that contribution under a Liberal government in Ottawa that wanted an alternative to going to Iraq. So the purpose of the Afghanistan mission was a token to show they were still on side with the United States in the war on terror, even though they decided they did not want to go to Iraq. But over time, and with the election of a Conservative government of Stephen Harper, the current government, Canada's really re-upped its commitment, but it's done more. It's made sure the troops have adequate equipment, made sure they've had adequate support, and we've seen, as the Canadian public has started to see their troops actually fighting, not just acting as rent-a-cops at the mall for the UN, just doing peacekeeping, but real fighting, that the respect for the military in Canada has skyrocketed. It's now the most trusted institution in the country, and that is tremendous. It allows Canada, even though Afghanistan's a world away, the very farthest end of Canadian supply lines, they're able to sustain that commitment, and that on top of having lost so far 80 soldiers. So it's not a light commitment for them. Now, all of that together gives Canada tremendous moral authority to talk to the NATO allies about the importance of making a serious commitment and why Afghanistan matters. This isn't a war of empire. This is Canadians recognizing that our security has something to do with the stability of the Afghanistan regime, the government that's there, and making sure the Taliban doesn't come back. I think they'll have a lot of influence. You can see that France is talking seriously about making a fighting contribution, not just a token one. I think there'll be a lot of pressure on Germany as well. Canada can speak to these issues because they're not us. It's not the U.S. browbeating for more burden sharing as we often do, but this time it's a NATO member that could have said no, that didn't, that I think will shame some of the Europeans into thinking twice about the Afghanistan mission.
If you'd like to hear more from Chris Sands, to read his views, you can find him on the Hudson website, www.hudson.org.